Thank you very much, Minako. Most interesting, as always, and with quite a few thorny issues to be addressed, particularly the legality of some of the activities that are happening, and the perception that some people have of themselves as being innovators and entrepreneurs rather than pirates or doing things illegal. But again, it's something that is being blurred constantly, and it is an issue that is new to some extent, but it has been around for many years. I remember when we started working in audiovisual translation, most of the books were on paper, and that was as audiovisual as you would get, a bit of paper and nothing else. And there was no DVDs, even though you were discussing audiovisual translation, and it was always an issue to use a secure permission to use any material that you could use. There are now new drives and people just doing what they call copyleft, so that you can just use it and maximize their potential. But it's still very, very thorny and very sort of risky sometimes when we deal with some of this material. And I'm not sure. You did ask the question at the very beginning to see whether we had any experts in copyright issues. Let's see if we can all together in this collective wisdom we can come up with an answer to your query, and so that your student can carry on with research and so on. I think we now have time for, you want to address Minako in the first instance, that's fine, but for anybody that is being contributing today, please feel free and any questions you would like to address, and we already have one there.
So if you have, say, blockbuster, a film, and there's no current professionals to translate the film script, do you have like fans or grassroots people, and they form a team to translate that?
You mean in Japan?
Yeah, or in the UK?
Well, I think in Japan it's really kind of legal issue is very much scaring them, and I haven't actually heard much activities fan translation in Japan. Japanese materials are used, but in terms of actually fan translating in Japan, I haven't really heard much. But they do partially contribute, for example, for manga fan translations called scanlation. And so scanlation means scanning of manga in the first instance, and often Japanese person living in Japan, as soon as manga comes out in print, they scan. So they participate in that way. So as for, I think, UK situation, Jorge can answer better, I think. So
the practice of fan subbing and the organization of teams is pretty widespread throughout Europe. I'm not really sure, particularly in Britain, because many things that gets fan subbed tend to be precisely in English into other languages. Though that doesn't mean, for instance, I know quite a few people that are doing the fan subs from here, from this country, but they're not nationals of this country, or they don't speak English as their mother tongue. But you do have lots of groups, and I was recently at the PhD Viva in Italy, where there was the PhD, the research was on fan subbing groups in Italy. And to some extent, it comes at some points that as if it was two football teams, and they get these sort of confrontations, and if one is quick to produce the subtitles for a program, the other one wants to be faster. And if they cannot be faster, they will always say, but we are better than the other ones. And they do have their comparatives and their information there, and it really is fascinating the way they just get into these dynamics of working for themselves, among themselves, and being proud of what they're doing and competing with other people. And as far as I know, there are fan subs, virtually in all countries in Europe.
In China, there's really well-known many groups doing this, and also other parts of Asia as well. As I said, I have Thai PhD students doing this, so in Thailand also it's happening as well. Yeah, so it's widespread, I suspect.
Okay. Can I ask, are they all non-profit, profit, so they don't make money, non-profit? Are they all this kind of team?
So as I mentioned, there are some groups who do try to make money, trying to send this material through, or sell these materials through eBay. But bona fide fan translation groups despise such act. But there are groups who are trying to make money too.
Sometimes these fan subs websites won't be making money through the fan subs, through the subtitles, but they will have a sponsored advertising. And they're using those people, or the income that comes from those sponsors, to sort of maintain the websites and so on. So there is that sort of legality as well, and how do you relate to that?
In Minako's presentation in the beginning, you mentioned about the transcreation. So what's your view on the domestication of, say, foreign films or any kind of audiovisual thing?
So transcreation is really interesting. Both Miguel and I have written about this. So some very top quality Japanese video games are often transcreated because really original games are just too culture specific. You know, some very quirky Japanese customs just do not go down very well in other countries. So total overhaul, change, adaptation. And also things like, you know, advertisement is very much, you know, like cosmetics, you know, you're worth it. That copy might change in certain other different countries. And some companies prefer to call it transcreation because they can charge more. It sounds like a copy, you know, editing. And so they seem to prefer that. But in terms of translation studies, there's a big kind of issue behind this because the concept comes from post-colonial theory, but we talk about later.
Is there any data on these grassroots fan translators becoming professional translators or being picked up?
Yes, there are many cases in video game industry. And if you actually search on the internet, there are many interesting examples you can see. So these are the kind of industries which really recognize practical experience, even if it's in a kind of slightly dicey way. In fact, I know, as a matter of fact, one of my best students back in Dublin, he was doing Japanese Irish student. He was absolutely brilliant because he was a fan subber. So he was just, you know, subbing like 300 hours worth of Japanese anime. So his Japanese skill was just far, far better than his classmates. So he was snapped up by Nintendo. And sometimes you can even write in your CV that you have done some fan translation work.
In regards to translation and fan subbing, for example, fan translation, the quality assessment, what for example, protection as for professional translators versus the fan translation there is, because the quality obviously is very important in regards to translation. So what type of protection do they have, or if they have anything in regards to quality assessment into that?
So as I mentioned, that fans, it's not completely free for all. They do have their own guidelines, standards, and similar for crowdsourcing. They often have guidelines which are not identical with professional guidelines. So all I can say is that I think comparing the quality based on absolute standards between fans and professionals is a bit kind of pointless, really. Because why do we do that for? So my way of thinking is that, yeah, this fit for purpose thinking is very much promoted, especially to do with machine translation field, because they never, for example, design machine translation to translate literary text. So they're not geared for that. But they can come up with some reasonable first pass translation for technical texts, then that's very much helping translators to use as a base in some cases if the time frame is so short, etc. So it's all to do with this fit for purpose concept. I know it's not very satisfying, and I know that this, you know, safeguarding profession, I'm very much, as I said, I come from translators background. It's a very worrisome trend if general public thinks that anybody can translate, and since it's fit for purpose, you know, I can live with just 1 or 2 mistakes and then do just ask, you know, free crowdsourcing translation. There's a huge danger there, and I don't know what we can do. But what's happening is that these kind of methods, crowdsourcing, is used by professional translation companies now. They're trying to incorporate these dimensions to sort of really divide the types of work in terms of, you know, top quality job and not so top quality is required. So even professional language service providers, in some cases seem to be making that sort of distinction.
My question really follows on from that, and I was going to ask what impact was fan subbing having on professional subtitlers. I read something recently online, I think it was a French article, saying that because fan subbers are turning content around so quickly, that then companies are asking professional subtitlers to be able to work to those sorts of time limits where, you know, professional subtitlers are, you know, checking their cultural references and, you know, researching things, and then are expected to, you know, to produce, you know, an hour-long episode, you know, by the next day or something.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So these sorts of things, fan translation, it has such a high profile now, it's become very visible. So it's impossible people not to notice, including the industry. So it is having some impact on the industry. So time frame issue, but also their particular approach. As you mentioned, one of the kind of hallmarks of fan translation is a kind of a thick, what we call thick translation, meaning that they kind of add very detailed cultural notes. They have a very didactic intention because they want to educate viewers a thing or two about, say, Japanese cultural aspects. So they put copious notes about cultural dimension, which learners, Japanese learners, find it extremely helpful. So therefore, some commercial companies have decided to take this kind of approach, adding really very detailed cultural notes. So in that way, that, yeah, the fan practices are interestingly affecting, although at the moment in a very minor way, affecting the professional practices is really interesting. I have a PhD student who worked on that a number of years ago. So Colm Caffrey, his thesis talks about that too.
I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Translate Adobe website that used to use crowdsourcing. Well, still does, but not very successfully anymore. Adobe was one of the first companies after Facebook, actually, to communitize translation for free, essentially. And they were using it, as Minako said, rather unethically to sell their products globally. They have two different ones they do. One is community translation, which is not using machine translation because there are no machine translation systems out there for languages such as Serbian. And then there's the machine translation community where it's called Adobe Translation. So it's been translated by machine translation SMT systems, and they ask users to go in and say whether or not it's a good translation, and if they have recommendation to improve it. So they're kind of being a little sneaky about getting better translations for their product translations. It's not as popular anymore as it used to be. You can tell if you go onto their website now. They have, I was on there a couple of weeks ago just to do some research, and there are 20,000 lines of text into German left, and it's been like that since the end of 2013. So the people aren't as interested anymore in doing these things for free, especially when they notice that Adobe, for example, is using it for corporate gain, basically. So I think that when we look at the fan subbing as fan subbing, as people who really want to, they just want, you know, they like to do this, it's a hobby, compared to crowdsourcing, which is now also being commoditized by companies like mine. We don't do it yet, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen as long as it's in a controlled environment and you're doing it for money, and you're doing it as we've said, sort of specializing. And that's okay. And I think if we move in that direction, that'll be fine. The free crowdsourcing, I think, is a dying breed. At least from what we've seen in the corporate world, it's not as popular anymore as it used to be, which is a good thing for us. So we can kind of see it as a fad in terms of it being free, but it's not a fad in terms of it being a useful way of getting translation. And we just have to find the right purpose and speed and quality in that type of environment so that everyone's, you know, doing what they want to do and doing it best and making money.
We had a presentation at the Localization Roundtable in Localization World by the company providing translation for Zynga. Zynga being one of the companies that makes video games for Facebook, among others. Zynga, they had come up with this crowdsourcing way of doing the translation, and that worked for them for some time with a lot of heavy editing and a lot of micromanagement of communities. In the end, they actually have reduced considerably, if not eliminated completely, the use of crowdsourcing for doing this, because one thing you have to do as a professional developer, publisher of video games is you want to hit the market when you want to hit the market. You don't wait around, and you don't, because you lose it. You lose your window, and that's your product. So in this sense, we've seen it that some video game development and publishing companies have tried it, and most often than not, they have given up on that because it requires the investment on the money they think they're saving on translation, they are using on post-editing and managing. So they're really not saving, and it's giving them a lot of headache. But it's just not productive. You cannot hit your deadlines to release your product. And in video games, you don't hit your deadline, and your window, you're out. You don't have a business.
So talking about crowdsourcing, it's very interesting. So Facebook really championed this concept by applying to localize their originally English-only website for Facebook, and they rapidly able to localize Facebook into different language versions. And interestingly, I went to a number of presentations by Facebook people, and their explanation was that they never make money not engaging professional translators, because the money resources are spent for developing special crowdsourcing platform and community management. Because community management is very, very important. As Miguel said, if you just left it on their own devices, often it's died down if there's not enough interest. So then Facebook, their argument is that their main interest is to use this as a community building. By community building, they engage users into their product. So that's their main goal, and that's the kind of consistent explanation that they've been giving, whether or not we believe that, but that's at least their explanation. And yeah, and another interesting thing about quality is that they get other users to decide, thumbs up, thumbs down, which translation is better, which translation is bad. So asking other users and deciding in that way, is again very interesting way of assessing translation quality.
We moved from the impact of the digital age on the profession, and how we moved from something which was very technical, very restrictive, to the point where it felt like a straitjacket, and you wonder, is this a profession that I want to do as a translator? To Minako's presentation, where it's, well, hey, let's do it. Translation, it's free, it's recreation, we're having fun, and that's what we've always wanted to do. However, speaking as a trainer, somebody who trains translators and who leads programs in teaching translators, I was wondering what role these two ends of the spectrum should play in the training program. In the end, a minority of students will end up doing localization or gaming if they are technologically minded. A minority would do fan translation because it's free, and that's not what they want to do. The majority would still go on doing traditional translation work, which is what we really train them to do. Translation procedures, strategies, methods, all the things that they will find useful eventually in the kind of job that they're going to end up doing, either at this end of the spectrum or at that end of the spectrum. So my question really is, what weighting should we give to these aspects of translation as the profession has become now?
I think that translation it's certainly never going to disappear in any way, and machines are never going to replace humans at all. I mean, just machines don't work like that, they don't do that anyway. But I think that what's happening is that as the spectrum is growing, and the translation that is being crowdsourced or done by communities are very often the ones that can be done recreationally, that you don't really mind how good or how bad it is because it is recreational. You're not going to write to Facebook and tell them, hey, this shouldn't be labeled, it should be tagged, because you're not that bothered anyway because the interaction that that's providing is for something else. But there will always be a market for quality translation. There will always be a market for very stylistic, well-written translation, just like for good writers. And you see this crowdsourcing method even on TV. I mean, people put it on TV, or channels put it on TV, things that people record at home with their own camera, You've Been Framed, or even Big Brother House. So I think in this sense, the translation profession will always be there. And I think our role is to localize, to find these niches, understand them, and put them back in context. And I think the context is like there are all these many options. As a translator or as a company providing translation, you can offer whatever type of t-shirt you want. You want to offer the t-shirt for £1, or you want to offer the t-shirt for £100, and that's the quality you put in there. None of them are going to disappear. They're all going to remain there. It depends what does the client want to buy. And like you said, in particular industries, the client will be always unhappy to pay, but will recognize that paying more for a good translation with good production, it pays, because then it brings the clients in for them. So I think that we will remain doing a very similar job. We will just keep on adding new trends and new tools. That's my guess.
My local high school says that what they're doing now is that they are training flexible, adaptable learners for the future. They can't teach everything. Do you think you're doing the same? Now you can't teach all the tools, but you need to teach students to be very adaptable, because the speed of change is in the future.
I think that sort of tags along with the concept of transferable skills that has been around for a long time. You just kind of over-specialized, because out there it's changing constantly. So you're not going to find, once you're trained and you leave, by the time you leave probably it's already different to what you've been told and what your trainers knew at that time. So in that sense, you have to make the most of it and try to be as transferable as you can with very general skills that you think you're going to be, employing later on, and that you can employ in very different areas. But I don't know if Kim, from the industry, what is it that you need from the industry that we should be training?
This is one of the things actually that Jorge and I are working on in with the EMT universities, trying to figure out what sort of curriculum we need for translators in industry, because essentially the industry we're just a really tiny piece of a very big world that has a lot of data that needs to be translated. And fit for purpose is one of the things that we have to get a grip on. We tend to like to think that everything needs to be quality, high quality, because it's our profession, and we want to make sure that, as a professional, what we do is good. And I think in probably 90% of all cases we probably do. But I want to bring sort of this question back to this question, because I think that being very technical doesn't necessarily mean you can't have fun in your job. And so it's all a question of evolution and moving sort of with keeping your eyes open and not having the blinders on. And that's what we need, basically. I mean, we need students who come from university, who've had a bit of practical training. I know it's very difficult in a master's program in the UK because it's only a year, but that have worked in industry in some respect for a little bit anyway. Don't only have literary translation, have some training in tools, regardless of what they are, as long as they're being exposed to them and understand that this is the way forward, because these are the things that we use. Machine translation is coming, and it doesn't mean it's like Miguel said, we're not going to disappear, but we have to embrace it in order to be able to use it properly, so that we don't get Google translation all the time on websites. If we don't want that, then we have to allow ourselves to be open to the tools and understand them and what their downfalls are, how we can work with these tools, how we can make the translations better so that we can get researchers and tools developers to listen to what we're saying. Because if we block ourselves to that, then they're just going to keep developing the tools the way they want, because we're not using them, but they don't care, because Google is. So this is what we need to do. But like I said, it doesn't mean we can't enjoy what we're doing. What I find sometimes is that we lament too much about how much money we don't make as translators. But if we don't, that's the problem of the people who are actually accepting the jobs at 2 cents a word. So those are the people that we need to be addressing when we talk about that. Because keeping ourselves professional means learning the tools, developing ourselves, getting ourselves out there, getting the message out there that what we do is actually worthwhile, and showing people. Language is something that we take for granted in most cases. We don't, because we work in this industry, but a lot of people do. So it's all about, like doctors, working with new tools and technology and understanding that there is evolution, and we are also part of evolution. We're also part of all of that.
Thank you for that, Kim. It's really very encouraging to hear such kind of balanced view from the industry. We very much tried, again, answering 2 questions here, that what I try to do is sort of affective learning, really trying to engage students. So in other words, we don't teach which button to press first and which button to press next. That's the most kind of boring type of way of teaching and learning. And technology changes all the time. So we really value more conceptualizing and reflecting and what they're doing, and always aware of why they're doing this. So we have very comprehensive technology education at our university. We train translators with all sorts of technology, including building their own SMT, statistical machine translation. And what we discover there is really, initially it's very technical, very challenging. Then students just tackle this like a puzzle, like a game, intellectual game. And when they discover, they can actually learn it, such enjoyment. And this is a kind of principles they take away, is that they can apply to other things. So that's the sort of really true sense of transferable skills in the intellectual challenge, intellectually, challenging tasks, and learning really by engaging themselves, not on a very superficial level, but really engaging themselves in it, is a very, very valuable way of learning. And from trainers' point of view, it's really so nice to see initially students who are very cagey about technology, even just their own admission, they don't like technology, but they actually, once they learn it, they really enjoy it, because it's not technology as such, but it's just something intellectual kind of challenge.
I'd like to just conclude this roundtable by thanking the speakers for having come here with such interesting topics and having engaged as well with the audience. Of course, thank you to everybody here in the audience, having braved London transport and having left behind that door a lovely day, or one of the, lovely day by standards in this country. And thank you very much as well. Last but not least, thank you very much to Europe House for always feeling us welcomed here. It just seems like a second house for some of us, and many thanks for being so hospitable.